So with your tables, I want you to plot the point that represents the decimal number given under the investigate rectangle. So y'all can work together, help each other figure out where 3 and 51/100ths would fall on this number line. And then 3 and 4/10ths on the number line, where would that fall? So y'all discuss each one of these and figure out where your point might go, and then we'll talk about it in a second. Okay, so I know some of you are not done. You're getting close, but we might not be done with all 5. So let's go ahead and start, because as I was walking around the room, I noticed that some of us were understanding exactly where 3.51 or 3 and 51/100ths would go, but some of us were putting it on a different spot. So I went ahead and wrote up here 3 and 6/10ths and then labeled 3 and 7/10ths so you could see how they're actually labeled. So if I'm looking at 3 and 51/100ths, I'm actually focusing my attention between these 2 points here. So where would 3 and 51/100ths go? Would it be closer to 3.5 or closer to 3.6? Right, your point should be really close to this line, like almost on the line. Some of you guys were putting your point right at 3 and 6/10ths. But I want you to pay close attention and notice that this is 3.5. It's right between 3 and 4. So if it's 3, think about money. $3.51. That's going to be a lot closer to $3.50 than it is to $3.60. Okay. Now on the next one, it's rounded to the tenths place, right? So I have 3 and 4/10ths. So where would that one go? Most of y'all had this one correct. To the left or to the right? To the left of 3 and 5/10ths. So it goes right here. A lot of you guys had that point correct. So good job on that one. Okay, questions on the first 2? All right, the third one is 3 and 9/100ths. So this one is like, think about money again. Okay, it's close to, now notice that these are again written to the tenths place. So if this was like $3.50, where would $3 be? Just plain $3. At the beginning. What would this one be? $3 and how much?
1 cent. Or, 1 cent.
$3.10, right? So 10/100ths. So where would $3.09 go? Right next to it, to the left. About right here. Okay, where would 3 and 77/100ths go? Is it going to be to the right of 3.5 or to the left of 3.5? Let's start there. It'll be in this section. Okay, it's 3 and 77/100ths. So I need to figure out where 3 and 7/10ths would be. If this is 3 and 5/10ths, this is 3 and 6/10ths, 3 and 7/10ths, 3 and 8/10ths. Is it going to be closer to 3 and 8/10ths if I'm looking at 77, or is it going to be closer to 70? 70 or 80? Why closer to the 80? Why would it be closer to the 80?
Because it's above it's above the 5 and the numbers. Because
Yeah.
7's above 5.
So look at that little mark that I made next to my dot. This little mark right here would be like 3.75, okay? And I want to put 3 and 77/100ths, so it's actually going to go a little bit further than halfway between those 2 distances on the number line, okay? And then the last one, 3 and 9/10ths, where does that one go? Right here next to the 4, good. Okay, now we're going to look ahead. So this is what is coming. It says circle the numbers above that round to 4 when rounded to the nearest whole number. Okay, which of these 5 numbers that we just plotted on the number line would round to 4 if I'm rounding to the nearest whole number? 3 and 9/10ths is one of them.
3 and 4/10ths.
Rounding it to 4 as a whole number. So think about, like, look at where my points are. This is where those right brain people in here, like me, this is where visual things help. So use where your points are. Look at this. Remember, 5 or more, we up the score. That's our rounding rule, right? Less than 5, take a dive. So if it's above halfway through in a number line, is this point above the halfway mark? So is it closer to 4 or is it closer to 3? It's closer to 4. Good. So this would be rounded up to 4. Okay, what about the next one? Is this point closer to 3 or is it closer to 4?
3.
It's closer to the 3, so that would not round up to 4 as a whole number. What about this point? Closer to 3 or 4?
3.
It's closer to 3, so that is going to round to 4 or not going to round to 4? Not. What about the next one?
4.
It's going to round to 4. Okay, so visually we can see that the points are closer to the 4. They're past the halfway mark, closer to 4, that round up to 4. Now let's look at those numbers. Okay, if I'm rounding the whole number, the number that I'm going to be rounding, it's either going to change or it's going to stay the same, is the ones digit. Okay, I look directly to the right, its neighbor. Its neighbor is going to tell me what happens to the number. So if I don't have a number line to look at, I want to make sure I'm looking at the neighbor. So I'm going to look right next door at all of these numbers. If these numbers that I have just circled are 5 or more, that means that my whole number goes up to 4. Every single one of these have 5 or more in the place, which means every single one of those does round to 4. So we can see it and prove it visually. We can see they're closer to 4, but we also can see with just the numbers as well. Okay, so we've just kind of explained how we know in a whole bunch of different ways. So let's pick one that we want to write down. Do we want to talk about visually what we can see? Okay, I see some nods. So we're going to say the points are closer to 4 than 3. Does that make sense to everybody? Because if it doesn't, we can talk about it or rephrase it and say it in a different way. We're talking about all the points. The points are closer to 4 than they are 3. That's why those numbers round up to 4. We're going to look at what they have right here. Okay, it says use place value to round 2. How do I read that number? 2 and the very top. How do I read this number? Close, so close. Thousandths, right. 2 and 185 thousandths. We want to round that number to the nearest whole number and to the nearest hundredth. So I'm going to round that number 2 different times. First, I'm going to round to the nearest whole number. Then I'm going to round it again to the nearest hundredth. So looking at the nearest whole number on this side over here, I would underline the whole number, and I'm going to look at the neighbor to the right. They color-coded it for you so you can see the difference. Because 1 is less than 5, I'm going to take a dive. So that means I'm rounding down to 2.0 basically. But because it wants me to round to the whole number, I just leave it 2. I take off the decimal. I don't put anything behind the decimal. I want the whole number to be the last number written since I'm rounding to the nearest whole number. Okay, now for the nearest hundredth, notice here they have 2 and 19 hundredths. They didn't put a 0 after, like how we do with whole numbers, like when we're rounding just basic whole numbers. We always put zeros to fill in the spaces. We don't do that here. They take off every digit beyond the hundredths place. So they don't put a 0 for the thousandths, because if I did, I would read it 2 and 190 thousandths instead of the nearest hundredth. I want my digit to be in the place that I'm rounding to. That's the last digit. All right, so let's look at some examples and we'll do these together. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. It says round the number to the place of the underlined digit. So looking at the first 4, we'll do the first 4 together. You'll try the next 4 together at your tables without me. Okay, so looking at number 1, the 6 is underlined, which means I want to look at the 7. So let's go ahead and circle the number that's going to tell us what to do. The neighbor is the judge. Sometimes I call it the judge. The judge is to the right. It tells me what happens to the underlined digit. Because it's 5 or more, what happens to the 6? It goes up. So it's going to be 12 and 7/10. Okay, the next digit that's underlined is the 4. On this one, I'm going to be looking at the 3 to the right. Because 3 is less than 5, what will happen to the 4?
It'll stay the same.
It'll stay the same. Very good. So I drop everything after the tenths place. So it's just 0 and 4/10. Number 3 is rounding the whole number, the ones place. So I look to the number directly to the right. It's a 5, so what happens to the 2? It goes up to 3. Leave everything else off. And then the 4 in the tenths place, what's directly to the right? A 0, so my answer is going to just be 5 and 4/10. Okay, I want you guys to try 5 through 8 with your tables. Help each other. Circle your judges. The number directly to the right should be circled on every single one, and then we'll check. So I had a couple questions, just wanting to double check. Okay, so everything before the underlined digit stays the same? Yes. Everything before the underlined digit stays the same. So when I'm looking at these numbers, on number 5, I'm going to go ahead and write down 1.4 because those stay the same. On number 6, I'm going to go ahead and write down 5 point something because everything before the underlined digit stays the same. On number 7, I don't have anything before the 8, so I'm not going to put anything. And same thing for number 8, I have nothing before the 3. Okay, so everything before that rounded digit stays the exact same. Now, here's where I've got to get to work. On number 5, I've underlined 8, so my judge is what? 2. Because 2 is less than 5, what will happen to the 8?
It'll stay the same.
It just stays the same, so that's my answer. Everything after the underlined digit falls off. It disappears. Number 6. 5 point what? My underlined digit is 0. My judge is 9. Because 9 is more than 5, what happens to the 0?
It will turn into 1.
It goes up to a 1 and everything else falls off. Great job, London. Number 7. My underlined digit is 8. So my judge is what digit? 5. It's 5 or more. So what happens to the 9? Sorry, I just gave the answer. The 8 changes to a 9, and it's just 9. Everything else falls off. And then number 8, the judge is going to be the 4. So what happens to the 3?
It just stays the same.
It stays the same, but is this my answer?
No, it's 4.
Bo, it's 30. Yes, because it's a whole number. She said I have to add a 0 after the 3. Because if you notice, the 3 is in the tens place. So we go back to our original rounding rules. Where with whole numbers, when you round a whole number, everything after the digit or the place that you're rounding turns to a 0. So I'm rounding the tens place, which means it should be 30. 34 is closer to 30 than it is to 40. In my mind, with so much practice, I can picture where this is on a number line. That's where I want you to get. I want you to start trying to visualize where these numbers would fall on a number line. If I'm rounding a 3 in the tens place, and it's 34, is 34 closer to 30 on a number line, or is it closer to the 40?
30.
It's closer to the 30. So try, because I have a number line right up here. You can try using that to help you visualize where things are. Okay, it'll help. All right, round 0 and 6800ths to the nearest tenth. Well, now I have to identify the tenths place. So what am I going to underline? What digit am I rounding? I'm rounding the 6. So we're going to underline that, and then we're going to circle the judge, which is the 8. So my answer should be 0 point what? 7. Oh my gosh, you guys are so smart. Okay, and then number 10, I'm rounding 1 and 715 thousandths to the nearest hundredth. Hundredth. It's this 1.
1.7.
So the 5 is my judge. Nearest hundredth. The 1 is in the hundredths place. That's the digit that will either stay the same or change, depending on the judge. So I'm going to go ahead and write down 1.7. Is it going to be 1 or 2? 2, and that's my answer. Okay, y'all try 11 and 12 with your tables. Underline the digit it's telling you. and then circle the judge to the right on 11. Okay, did you guys underline the 4 in number 11? Okay, that's the whole number, so we're rounding that digit. You should underline the 4. The judge is directly to the right. It's 0. So what is 4 and 700 closest to? 4 or 5? 4. Okay, on number 12, we're rounding to the nearest tenth. The 2 is in the tenths place. So the judge is 8. Okay, will it be closer to 2 tenths or 3 tenths? 3 tenths. Very good. We're going to stop here for today and finish the rest tomorrow. Okay, so we have been looking at how to round decimal numbers. We underline the place that we're rounding and we circled the number to the right. We call that, do y'all remember? The starts with the J. Judge. Okay, it determines what happens to the number that I'm rounding. So this one is a little different. We're going to do 13 together. I'm going to let you do 14 with your table. But number 13 says round 829 thousandths to, and I have to round it 3 different ways. First, to the nearest whole number. So I am going to underline the whole number, which is 0. And the judge to the right is 8. So what's the nearest whole number? Jason? 1. Good. Okay, the next one says round to the nearest tenth. What digit is in the tenths place?
The 2.
The 8 is in the tenths place, which means the 2 is the judge. So since 2 is less than 5, what's going to be my number rounded to the nearest tenths place? 0 and 8 tenths. Remember, we want to make sure that we drop all of the digits after the tenths place. If it says round to the nearest tenths, we drop all the digits after the tenths place. Okay, now for the hundredths place. On this one, I'm going to round which digit? The 8, the 2, or the 9? The 2, which means the judge for the 2 is 9, which is bigger than 5. So what's going to happen to the 2? It'll bump up. So I'm going to have 0.83. Okay, y'all try number 14 with your tables. So while you've been working with your group, I've heard some interesting conversations. I've heard some good mathematical arguments, and I've heard some people doing some really good explanations and proving why they feel so strongly about something. So one of the things that I heard was 18 should round up to 20 because we're rounding to the nearest whole number. It should round up to 20. Here's the problem with that. If I'm rounding it to 20, I'm rounding the tens place and not the ones place. If I'm rounding to the nearest whole number, that actually means the ones place in this. So I underlined it up here. I'm actually going to be rounding the 8. So I look directly to the right. Since it's 5 or more, the 8 will go up to a 9. So my whole number, my nearest whole number is 19. I'm not rounding to the nearest tens place, just the nearest ones, the whole number. Okay, the nearest tenths place. I had questions on this one too. Heard some good discussions. We knew we were rounding the 6. We knew the 6 was going to stay the same, but we weren't sure if we should change the 18 to 19 since we just rounded that whole number and now put 19.6. But we are only rounding the tenths place. So we're going to leave everything before the tenths place how it was. So it'll be 18.6, 18 and 6 tenths. Again, you want to drop all of the digits that follow after the tenths place. And then the nearest hundredths is the 0. So 2 is my judge. So if I round that number to the nearest hundredths place, it'll be 18 and 60 hundredths. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you feel like you understand that. Okay. In the middle if you're still kind of in the middle because we've got some more to go. Okay. All right. The next part says name the place value to which the number was rounded. So this time I'm actually given a number and I'm given the rounded number and I have to figure out what did I round it to. So I started with 8 and 942 thousandths and I now have 8 and 94 hundredths. So this is what I started with. Now I have this digit as my last digit. So what place did I round this number to? Yes. to the hundredths place. How do I know?
Because there's not a 2.
Because there's not a digit in the thousandths place. The last digit is in the hundredths place, which means that the entire number was rounded to the hundredths. So I'm going to underline the 4 in the hundredths place and write hundredths, because I want to make sure you guys understand that the last digit that's listed, whatever place it falls in, that's the place I rounded to. Okay, the next one is 164 thousandths, and it was rounded to 2. What place is the 2 in? The tenth. So it was rounded to the tenths place. Y'all try number 17. Try number 17. You can talk about it. Check with your table mates. Okay, so we're looking at 15 and 826 thousandths, and it's rounded to 16. What did I round it to?
The whole number.
The whole number. We could also say what specific place? The ones place. So we can say the ones or to the nearest whole number. Yes.
Why don't we have a round to thousands?
Well, because you don't have a digit in the 10,000ths place yet. Not in 5th grade. You will have longer numbers later. Okay. Number 18 says, find 2 different numbers that round to 7 and 42 hundredths when you round to the nearest hundredth. That means I have to have a digit in the thousandths place, because I got to use a thousandths digit as my judge. So what number could the judge be for my answer to end up being 7.42? Jason. Okay, so if I put an 8 at the end of this number, will my answer still be 7 and 42 hundredths?
No.
Why would it not be? Yeah.
Because 8 is greater than 5.
Because 8 is bigger than 5 and it would round it up. Okay, so I know 8 can't work. That's a little too high. So what digit might work? Kingston, what do you think?
7 and 42. 3.
A 3? Could a 3 work?
Yeah.
If I round it to the hundredths place, would it be 7 and 42 hundredths?
Yes.
Yeah, because 3 is less than 5, right? Less than 5, take a dive. So that could work. So we can put that as one of my answers, 7.423. Okay, well, what is another digit that I could put at the end of that number? London?
0.
I could put a 0. What's another digit? Jeb? 1. Austin? 4. Good, and that's it. 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Those are the only digits that will work. Okay, so you can put any number you want as long as it has a 0 or a 1 or another 2 or a 4. It has to be under 5. Does everybody understand that concept?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I put -1?
No. Because the whole number would then have to be. So you can't do a specific digit as a negative. It would have to be the whole entire number. Okay, number 19. Explain what happens when you round 2 and 999 thousandths to the nearest tenth. I'm rounding this digit here. What is going to happen? Y'all talk about that one at your tables. Talk about what would happen. Okay, I heard some good conversations. I heard some right answers. And that's when I was like, okay, explain why. Because some of us were just like, it's going to be 3. And I was like, that's great. I'm hearing great things. It will be 3. I'm going to round my answer to 3. But what is happening? That's the question. What happens? It's a chain reaction. Okay.
Just like when you're adding.
Oh, everybody listen. I have one hand.
Just when you're adding, you can't have a 10 in one spot. You have to deposit the 10 into the next spot.
Very good. When you are rounding and it bumps up to 10, I can't put 2 digits in one place. Okay, that digit will become a 0 here. And then I carry the 1 over here to my 1's place. And so it ends up changing to 3. And we'll say when you have 9 that rounds up. And whatever you put is fine. If you explained it differently, but similarly, that's fine. Some of you I know were waiting so that you could copy down what I put. So it'll be 3, because when you have 9 that rounds up, you carry the 1 over to the ones place. When you have 9 that rounds up, you carry the 1 over to the ones place. I feel like I'm missing something. Carry the 1 over to the ones place, and the tenths is 0. Okay. All right. I want you and your table mates to do number 20 together. If you've already done it, just hang tight, but talk about it and talk about why. Okay, after discussion, what did we decide? 4 and 345 thousandths rounds to what? This is the number I'm rounding. It rounds to the walrus. Good. The orange one. We're now checking what we just did together. 4 and 344 thousandths rounds to, I'm rounding to the hundredths place, so this one will be the wolf or the fox. The pink one, 4 and 433 thousandths. I'm rounding the hundredths. This is my judge. So this one's going to be the polar bear, and the last one is the rabbit. Okay, last page of our notes. This is such a great example because gas is everywhere. We have gas stations everywhere. And you've probably noticed this before. There's always a little 9 right here. Okay, and it makes it look like the gas is cheaper a gallon, but it's really going to round up to $2.80 a gallon for regular unleaded. For plus unleaded, it would be $2.96, and then supreme would be $3.20, because that little 9 in the thousandths place is rounding my hundredths place. So let's look at our example below. It's talking about the length of a praying mantis rounded to the nearest hundredth. We've got a bunch of different bugs. Okay, we've got the cicada that's like those chirpy ones in the summertime that make a lot of noise. I don't like them either. You've got the dung beetle, so gross. Hissing cockroach, and a praying mantis. Okay, so let's look at the praying mantis. Here's where I'm looking. I want to round that number to the nearest hundredth for number 21. So what digit is in the hundredths place, everybody?
The 5.
The 5. The judge is what digit?
4.
The 4. So what is it going to round to? 3?
3 and 250,000.
Just 25 hundredths. Remember, we're doing just the hundredths place. So I want to make sure that it is written to the hundredths. Okay, number 22. What is the length of a cicada rounded to the nearest tenth? Tenth. Okay, the cicada is 1.48. What digit am I rounding? The 4. So it's going to be what? Yeah, I heard somebody say it, 1 and 5/10. What is the length of a hissing cockroach rounded to the nearest tenth? Of 2.682. Yep, 2 and 7/10. You guys are getting so good at this. Great job. And then the last one, rounded to the nearest 10 cents. You have about $3. Rounded to the nearest 10 cents. You have about $3. What is the least amount of money you could have? I'm rounding to the nearest 10 cents. We're almost done. This is our last one. So talk about this one. We know what about money? The least amount of money. The least amount of money you could have. So think about the nearest 10 cents. That's the digit in the tenths place. So what's the least amount of money I could have? Practice starts. Make sure you're focused on the question, not something else. Okay. Guys, it should be $2.95 because what happens? It's the least amount of money I could have because if I have a 9 in the 10th place, I know it's going to round it all the way up to $3. But if I'm rounding to the 10 cents, okay, to the 10th place, that means with money, I always have to have 2 digits after the decimal. Are we all paying attention? Make sure we're listening. Okay. So I know that I've got to have 2 digits after the decimal. So if I'm rounding to the 10th place and I'm making it all the way to $3, it's kind of like that one that we had earlier where it was like 0.999. We talked about how it bumps it up. Okay. This is the least amount I could have. It could be $2.96, $2.97, $2.98, or $2.99, but it's asking me for the least amount of money that I could have. This is the least amount of money that would work because the 5 is the lowest digit that rounds my number up. Does everybody understand how that works? Okay, you guys are going to complete 1.9 today. We get out of here.